Okay, everybody, this is going to be DNSOP in about a minute and a half, maybe two.
So, welcome to the DNSOP working group. First session of this week on Monday. We have an hour, so we have a tight schedule for this one. Also for the Thursday, we have full agenda. Um, so, Suzanne, Tim is remote. I'm Benno. These are the chairs. Um, we use these social media and other media to exchange information with you. We have used Zulip, MeetEcho, and on-site tool. We come to that later. The minutes are taken by the minute maker, Paul Hoffman. Thank you. Thanks a lot. There's some changes here. Normally, we always introduce with the chairs the AD. But yeah, there's a new career for our Warren. So this is the last time Warren is our AD, and we want to thank him very much for the past years. It was my first and only AD when I started. I always enjoyed working with Warren. Was very interested, engaged in the DNSOP working group. Many thanks, Warren. We will definitely miss you. I think Suzanne and Tim will also say some words that we really, really miss you. And please welcome our new AD. That's Matt Mohammed Beauclair. He will take over the responsibility of being an AD of the working group. And we will meet him during the week and transfer the work and make sure he's on speed with us. Thank you, Warren.
I'm not in the queue, but I quickly. Warren Kamari. Thank you. So thank you very much. Like DNSOP has always been my favorite working group. One of my favorite working groups. I say that or everyone else will hate me. And yeah, thank you very much for putting up with me and some of my drama. But yeah, this has always been one of my favorite working groups. So thank you very much. Med is chairing or ADing or whatever grow at the moment because they're conflicting, so he sends his regrets.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So this is an IETF meeting, so the note well applies. We assume that you are aware of the note well and have read the various, or have read the text. Part of the note well is also the IETF code of conduct, and we take this seriously. We put it in red. So we really take this seriously. So if you think the code is being violated, please contact Suzanne, myself, or Tim, or the IETF Ombuds team. So it's important to be kind and respectful to each other. These are the IETF meeting tips. If you're in the room, please register. Oh, the quad code is away, but please register via the agenda, whatever, at the entry. There are the quad codes, because there's all the blue sheets. So it's important that you register. It's also part of the IETF meeting code of conduct. Or sorry, the note well. Register for the meetings. If you're remote, you can use, well, obviously you are registered automatically. They act as the blue sheets. Good. This is the agenda for today. Skip that one. I want to hand over the mic to Tim. Please go ahead.
Do I get the clicker as well?
Yeah, I will click. I will give
So,
you the click.
greetings all. Sorry I cannot be there. So, sorry, Warren, we will miss you, but you're never far away. Where's that damn clicker?
Okay, you can click if you want.
Oh yeah, there we go. Wait, it is not.
No, it's going, yeah.
There they are. Yeah. Cool. So since our last meeting, we published a few things. Did you do that, Benno, or did I do that? You took it back from me, so I assume you took control.
I will take control back.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So, yep, we've gotten a couple things done, but we have. It's kind of weird. There's a lot of stuff in the editor queue. So if we go to the next slide, Compact Denial Existence is basically moving along. They're in edit state, which is pretty good, considering we have other ones that aren't, which is kind of odd. So if we go to the next slide, we'll kind of run through a couple of things. Generalized notifies finished up the IETF last call, and Peter's got some. I think he's revising the revised ID, and that's moving along. Wes and Warren we've been beating on them pretty hard with the two. The must not GOST is on the telechat, but they've got some changes they've got to do for SHA-1, which it sounds like Wes did today. And if we go to the next slide, this was kind of the weird thing that we got stuck on. If you all remember, Paul did this 9157, which kind of changed the registries to make them a little easier to get for the DNSOP algorithms. And while these guys were updating it, they weren't actually referencing it in their document, which was kind of it. And Med kind of raised this point. It was it seemed pretty valid. So as of this afternoon, they seem to have sort of sorted that out. And so if Wes or Warren are there, they can sort of speak to that. The point was, they took Paul's text, which was great, but they didn't actually make any reference that they did that. So that seems sort of like somebody's going to forget that. So I think we're in pretty good shape here.
Yeah. So Tim.
So thanks guys for dealing with that.
Tim, Wes is at the mic.
Oh yeah, good. Go Wes. I see him now.
Yep, no problem. Hi, Tim. You need to come to one of these things so we can have breakfast together again.
I know.
So the status of all three are there's a little tiny last minute changes. We're reviewing them all now. Probably within a week, we'll have the new versions out that will deal with this and also, you know, various reviews that have come in. I got a lot of good comments from the IETF, you know, wide review.
Yep.
And it all looks good.
So, and you understand what Med was saying and Eric, and we all kind of agreed that you should at least, you know, reference you clean that all up sort of thing.
Yep, and that's been handled. Cool. In fact, you, I think, reviewed the change I proposed earlier today as well as somebody else. So it looks like that proposed change to include texter on that's going to fly right through. So.
Cool. Thank you, sir. So yeah, that's pretty good. So if we go to the next slide, yeah, Warren, structured DNS error has been stuck in the data tracker, and I think it got stuck in one of those small data tracker bugs. And now we're stuck because Med's an author and he can't be the AD, so we'll have to make you solve that problem.
Okay. Warren is working on. Oh, sorry, Warren, go ahead.
I believe the plan is not Med. Eric Fink is going to handle this.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, yeah, that was kind of strange. Okay, so DNSSEC automation. Benno wrapped up this working group last call, and we changed it to informational, which made more sense. And we think we're okay, but we didn't get as much feedback as we thought we'd get. But you know, it's always hard to tell. So I think unless we hear otherwise, we'll probably move this one forward, especially since it's informational. It'll be less tragic, less controversial going through the IHG process. Yep. So if we go to the next slide, there's some other stuff. Oh yes, NS revalidation. We're going to kick off this working group last call today. So we will send that email during the meeting and sort of start that. We've been sort of waiting to get that one moving. So now that Willem and Schumann done all the edits, I think we'll be in good shape on this. So just a heads up on that. So, and if we go to the next slide, we've got, oh yes, a couple things on today's agenda, making progress on stuff. And I think Peter's CDS consistency is about ready to go to working group last call as well. So that would be a good thing. And if we do the next one, I've been waiting to sort of, okay, a couple documents still waiting their turn. And I think they'll be coming up because fairly shortly here. So, anyway, if we go to the next slide, what else? Oh yes, we're going to kick off a call for adoption on the DNS integration. I've been waiting to do this while we cleaned up the 3901 biz one. And so I think it has that relevance with the domain verification one. So I was going to write that up and sort of kick that off. We've been sort of sitting on that, and I've been wanting to get that done to see if people are interested. Okay, next slide. And we adopted 3901 biz, even though it was a bit controversial. And I know the chairs are a bit worried. We don't want to get into a messy situation like we did with the void fragmentation. But I think, you know, we feel confident if we set up the right situation, we'll be okay. So I think, and yeah. Okay, so we go to the next slide. Do we have it? Nope, that's what we're working on. There's the stuff. And I think there's two other, oh yes. So, and we have to apologize. There was an interim on the DNSSEC signing pipeline, and we were a bit scattered on getting the minutes together. And I did some, and then Benno did some, and we kind of merged them, and then he rewrote some of it over the weekend. And we recently published them, so we're a bit late. That it's not a long talk. The slides are really good. There's a lot of good stuff in the slides that kind of explain the sort of distributed process there. And there does seem to be relevance in what they're doing and what's going on. And you'll see some Johan will be talking. He's been talking about it all week. So anyway, take a look at that and see where it goes. And I think we're ready. So the only other thing is the Peter's DNS. Next slide. I think it's the last one. Yep, the PQ DNS side meeting is tomorrow. That's it. So I'll move things along. So I've been talking too much.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
So very.
Oh yeah, you have the hackathon stuff.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I will do a very brief update on the hackathon projects, the DNS. So, Jeff.
A very quick comment about the lack of reviews that you were talking about, Tim, on some of those drafts. Once again, I remind the chairs that the DNS directorate is there to do precisely that. And so it's kind of back to you. If you assign it to the directorate, we will get a reviewer and it will get some review. That's exactly our role. So please do so. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, the hackathon project. We had 6 projects of DNS-related projects in the hackathon. Just going over the 6th one. So this the one was done by Yorgos. It's on dry run DNS. The draft will be presented on Thursday. It's building upon the extended DNS errors and DNS error reporting, and with a new DS digest algorithm, you can kind of do a production test of your DNSSEC sign zone, etc. So that's interesting. That will be presented at Thursday. DNS over constrained application protocols by Martine Lenders. She worked on integrating the code now in Unbound and reported on that. There's the post-quantum crypto for DNSSEC by the team, by Andre, sorry. So testing new post-quantum cryptography algorithms will be reported on tomorrow morning, 9:30. I'm correct, Andre? Yep, okay, I get a nudge. So tomorrow, if you want more details, tomorrow morning, 9:30 at the post-quantum cryptography side meeting for DNS, sorry. Good. Next was 3 other projects with the post-quantum cryptography DNSSEC metrics with MTL mode. Joe and Swapnil worked on that and presented their results. They set up this time a test environment to measure the response size and query time across different networks. So they had a beautiful matrix with checks and empty boxes where, no reply or drop brackets. Oh, well, I was sorry. So there was a good matrix with where it was successful and not successful. Good. Implementing multi-queue type. Ted Lemon did implement some first implementation of the draft and sent some implementation notes back to the DNSSD mailing list. Tim forwarded also some of the discussion to the DNSOP mailing list. So please have a look at the discussions. Give Ted some feedback. He has some questions. Ted is over there. Some questions which direction should be taken. And finally, the work of Johan Stenstam. It's a kind of an work related to the DNSSEC the distributed multisigner. Was working on the HSync HSync resource record, and the communication between providers is now more robust against outages and interrupts. And more will be presented also on Thursday. Good, let's move on. For today, we have 2 working group documents presented, and that's by Peter and by Schumann, and then 2 new work for consideration. I'd like to invite first Peter Thomassen for a short update on the slides. Shorts on the draft. This one.
Hello. Hello. This is Peter. Okay, so this is a very quick update on the CDS consistency draft. Next slide, please. So quick reminder, the CDS, CDNS key, and ceasing records are intended to convey the intent of the zone owner for whatever the DS or NS records in the parent should be. But that's sometimes unclear if the name servers serve inconsistent CDS or CDNS key records and, for example, don't reference the same set of keys. That can happen in all sorts of circumstances listed here, and then as a result, the delegation might break and no longer can be validated, so no longer resolves in validating resolvers and all of that. So the draft just says parents must not apply those updates if the intent's unclear and contradictory. It does that by querying all authoritative name servers and comparing whether things are consistent, and name servers that don't respond are disregarded. Yeah. So if you see an inconsistency, you abort, and there's no overhead if the records actually don't indicate that a change is desired, because then you see there's no change on the first name server already, and then you don't have to ask the others. So that's how it works. Next slide, please. Over time, the thing has evolved thanks to feedback from the working group, especially about retries and ceasing processing. And the draft is now stable. The title has changed from its initial title, I don't remember what it was, to clarifications on CDS, CDNS key and ceasing consistency, which I think is a pretty accurate thing. Switch is working on an implementation, and that's essentially it. And the question would be, are there any more changes needed? In which case, it would be cool to have them on the list or here, or otherwise take it to the next steps.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions, comments? No, the chairs are also thinking it's ready for working group last call, so it's time to speak up now. Okay, thank you.
Okay, was it way too loud? Like, I'm not sure about the level. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, can I invite Schumann to stage?
Okay, good afternoon, folks. I'm going to give a quick update. Closer? Okay, all right. On the domain control validation using DNS draft. You may have seen in response to some critiques from Paul Hoffman, I think, and a few other folks, and more importantly, self-critiques from some of the authors on the draft themselves, we came to the conclusion that there is a lot of too much nitty-gritty DNS protocol stuff there, which is kind of off-putting and made the document less comprehensible to its really intended audience, which is application service providers. So what we did was, we mentioned this on the list, we undertook a little project to revamp and restructure the draft, and that resulted in revision 07. And I'm confident, of course, that everyone in the room has read it, right? The main changes are we took out some of the DNS esoterica and pushed it into the appendix. And we also removed a very large section that was in the appendix, which was essentially a survey of domain validation techniques in use by many application providers. So that was very useful when the draft started off as an informational survey of this topic. But now that it's a BCP, it's kind of a little bit out of place, so we excise the whole thing. And we start up front with early in the doc with our specific recommendations, which are that you should use text-based DCV records with a random challenge in the R data. And the record name, the owner name, is not the domain name being validated itself, but a subdomain of it, specifically constructed by an underscored application-specific label. Next slide, please. All right, so on CNAME, I think Paul originally wanted us to remove the CNAME discussion entirely, and I think I persuaded him on a list that we need to keep it because there was a bunch of CNAME only DCV techniques that were used kind of badly by some application providers. We got rid of that. But there is a very valid use case for CNAME for delegated domain control validation, and we've decided to keep that in the document. We also kept the support for multiple intermediaries. This is where you could have multiple accounts on a cloud provider, and you want each of those counts to independently do domain control validation. And the way we accomplish that is by prepending another label to the front of the owner name, which is specific to the account, or if you want to hide the account, like a hash or a truncated hash of it. We also removed the scope indication mechanism. There was a section about this, and this was essentially a mechanism to differentiate a domain name from a subtree rooted at the domain name, and also wildcards under a domain name. So arguably, this topic is a little bit too certificate issuer centric, and the CAB Forum and ACME, they have considered it. They haven't adopted yet, so we can't claim it's a BCV. So our plan is take it out, and at some point we will construct a new draft and take it to ACME for discussion. Next slide. And this is our first pass at revamping the draft. So when we looked at it, we're not entirely pleased with it, and we have some readability improvements in the pipeline, which you will see shortly. Next slide. And that leads me to the last topic. I thought we were getting close to done, but then suddenly our friend Paul Hoffman requested a set of additional changes on the list. I've responded on list, and Paul and I have also met in person this weekend to hash those things out. So we're getting closer. We're not too far apart, so I think we can work out some of those and converge. I'm not going to go through all of them. I think the first 3 or 4 of them, I think we can probably work those out and get consensus. I do want to make one comment on Paul, your claim that this document is too certificate issuer centric, and I don't agree with that, as you know, right? Because we do mention that case in the document several times, but if you look at the long survey of providers from previous versions of the draft, you'll see most of them are not certificate issuers, and these techniques apply just as well to all of those, right? So I disagree with that claim. And then the last one is the kind of tricky one, which is Paul wants us to consider other application use cases, not just the what we have today, the non-spaced DCV validation. So it has been stated there are a bunch of applications that a lot of these are in the decentralized social media identifier space, and they want to keep a persistent identifier in the zone to associate with the domain names with the application service. In my view, this is a slightly different class of application than the non-spaced DCV that we have, because these contain other things in the R data, and they do things in addition to just domain control validation. They have a method to resolve these DIDs as well. So I was a bit resistant to increase the scope of this document with that discussion, but I'm still discussing with Paul. What I would like to happen is not have this discussion solely between the two of us. I would like my co-authors and other people in the working group to chime in and figure out where we can gain some consensus. And the other thing I want to point out that I recently learned at the hackathon this weekend, actually, that Swapnil Sheth from VeriSign also has a draft in the pipeline that is proposing to cover this application use case in detail. So one thing we can do, I think Paul doesn't agree with me, is not discuss that approach in this draft, but punt it to the other draft and make sure we don't have any wording in this draft that rules out that possibility. But I'm open to suggestions, and I hope people will chime in. I think that's it. Is there another slide? Okay, so I'll stop here. I think I only asked for 5 minutes, so I don't know if we have time for questions.
We have 1.5 minutes for questions. Okay. Yeah, we were good for 8 minutes for your presentation. Okay. So.
Yeah, so we can certainly look forward to a new draft. I'm not even going to ask when you think there'll be a new draft.
Okay. Please, Benjamin, please go ahead. Oh, Ben, sorry.
Hi. Hi, this is Ben Schwartz. So, Schumann, I agree with you that there's a very strong distinction that I think we should emphasize in the draft between domain control validation and domain-based authorization. In my view, the second thing is like an MX record. It says, hi, I'm the owner of this domain. I delegate the operation of certain functions related to this domain to some other party named here. That's what an MX record is in my view. And that's also what putting in your Blue Sky handle or keys or TLSA or anything else. That's what normal DNS records are. That is not domain control validation.
Right.
My other comment here is that I think section 3, talking about wildcards, should go further down. It's like it seems like a digression to a special case.
Okay, you'll have to remind me what section 3 is because I don't have the document in front of me, but I will take a look later. Thank you, Ben.
DKG?
Hi there. I'm a little bit worried about the overlap between the namespaces used for domain control validation and for these other parameters. The Blue Sky handle being the example.
Yep.
It does seem like there needs to be some attempt to address that, if only to say, here's how you ensure that your service provider isn't tricking you into claiming an identity on one of these decentralized social media networks.
Right, yeah, so I think, Daniel, I share that concern a little bit. And the other reason is, as you say, it's slightly different than the use cases in the rest of the draft. And also, this is an area where I think the authors don't have a lot of expertise in, so we haven't had the time to review the security and operational characteristics of that scheme. So I think if we wanted to bundle that use case in this draft, we would have to do quite a bit more to look at those aspects.
Right, so I'm not saying we need to bundle the scheme in this draft. I'm just saying that if this draft is using a mechanism that is also being used in this other way, and the operators who are trying to use mechanism A don't realize that they're maybe stepping on the domain for application B, that's a real security issue, right?
Yep.
If I can convince you while you're validating your domain control to claim to be some particular user on Mastodon, that's, I give you a nonce, you don't look at it, you're just doing the standard thing, you add the text record, boom, done. It's got an underscore prefix, we must be good. And if we don't address that here, then we're leaving a massive hole. And I think we need to be able to talk with the folks who understand those use cases and figure out how we distinguish those scenarios.
Yep, good points. I agree.
Thank you. Please, further discussion on the mailing list or directly, well, now we're here all together, contact Schumann directly and talk with him. Thank you. Up next is it's Fujiwara-san.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think it's actually the agenda we published has Mark Nottingham next.
Apologies, Mark. I was following the Meet Echo order. Apologies. Want the clicker?
Yes.
Yeah. There we go.
Hi, I'm Mark Nottingham. I work for Cloudflare, and I'm going to talk about a draft that I published a little while ago that is now called DNS Filtering Details for Applications. So the motivation for this draft, there are out there in the world now increasing legal requirements to block or filter DNS. And I know that the working group has been responsive to that. We have the other draft from Dan Wing et al. These legal requirements are often targeting public resolvers, open resolvers run by various folks to address different use cases. My company runs 1.1.1.1. And we're seeing cases where different legal authorities are making demands to impose a form of censorship on especially public resolvers, but in discussion, we're seeing that in other places as well. This is one example. I tried my best to find the correct format for a legal citation, but I don't speak French, so that's probably not correct. So the problem that we're trying to solve is that when this happens, because the censorship is being imposed in DNS, for most applications, primarily web browsers, the reason for the failure is not apparent. It just doesn't work. You get, because the certificate doesn't resolve correctly, you get an unpleasant error and no more information. And that causes confusion for end users. They don't know why that this particular site is broken, and perhaps that increases the support load for the ISP or for other folks. But I think more importantly, it creates a lack of transparency around why blocking is happening, what the authority for that blocking is. And if it has a legal basis, then arguably people should know about that. So the solution is you need to expose more detail to clients so that can be presented to the end user. Fine. The problem is that there are a lot of considerations that you need to make when you expose information to end users. Because the DNS resolver can be configured by a network that might be controlled by an attacker, in a coffee shop or wherever, because it can be spoofed by on-network attackers, because there are many, many, many different kinds of DNS resolvers around the world, you can get into situations where this facility might be used for reasons other than to control access for legally required ones, which I would posit as undesirable. And also, of course, you can use this facility to attack users. You can use it to mislead them into doing something that is against their interests. And I want to point out that I know that not all DNS resolvers are bad. There are well-run DNS resolvers out there. There are ones configured by enterprise networks. There are ones that are trusted implicitly by the end users. But we have to create standards for the entire internet. And that includes a lot of resolvers that we don't know we can trust. So at this point, I'll inject kind of the perspective from the browsers who have to present this information to end users. And I'm very conscious that I am channeling my view of how they are thinking about this. I may get it wrong. I don't purport to represent the browsers. So if you're a browser person, please feel free to stand up and correct me. But this is my understanding. The browser vendor community has extensive experience with similar problems in presenting security-sensitive information to end users, especially around things like TLS. When there's a misconfigured certificate or an expired certificate or choices that have to be made, the browser community went through an incredibly painful period of time figuring out how to present that to users in a way where users just didn't click through it because they want to get to their stuff. And that has evolved to some fairly sophisticated thinking about how you present this information. Often users don't understand the threat model that they're operating under, and so you have to consider that as well. Additionally, and I think here especially, adding another voice to a dialogue. Effectively in most users' mental model, it's me using my browser to talk to a website, and we're the only people involved in conversation. Allowing another party to inject their voice into that dialogue creates risk. It creates an opportunity for misunderstanding, for attacks, whatever. And so the browser's stance in all of this is to avoid new attack vectors. And sometimes when we have conversations like this, people will say, well, but browsers allow X to happen. Why can't you do this? Because this is kind of analogous to X. And the answer to that is that they can't get rid of X because it would break the web effectively, usually. There are cases where they have to have facilities that they're trying to get rid of, but they keep it around because otherwise it's going to break too many websites to survive. That doesn't mean we should add new attack vectors equivalent to X. So when you think about mitigating those risks, if we're going to try and present some extra information to end users about why a DNS request was blocked or censored or whatever, we think about how do we mitigate the risks around that. And so one way to do that is to limit it to a set of trusted resolvers. And in the conversations I've had, some of the browsers have expressed interest in only those resolvers explicitly configured by the client or configured explicitly by the operating system, for example, imposed by policy and enterprise policy, or a set of known resolvers, ones that are using DOE or similar protocols. There are a couple of problems with this approach. One is that the resolver configuration is often unavailable to applications because it is in the operating system or somewhere else. And also, this gives discretion to the browsers and other applications about who they trust. And so put a pin in that concern. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is kind of the concerns that I've heard around this approach. Another mitigation, and these mitigations can be stacked, by the way, they're not exclusive, is to present the information to the end user as a diagnostic message, as technical information. You give as little control to the resolver as possible about what's presented. And so the example we have in the current draft here is to just say, hey, the web page at whatever site was blocked due to a legal request. Your DNS resolver may have more information about that here, and then give a link. So that an interested and maybe somewhat technical user can follow that and find more information, but everyone else understands that this is not really for you if you don't want more information about that. It's not, click this button to go through and see the site or something, which is a bad situation. And so, yeah, we talked about this before in the 0.0 draft. We were, using this system where we were limiting the details exposed to just the exposed resolver, the blocking authority, and the description to kind of create a template. In this 0.1 version, now we're just exposing a URI that can be presented to the end user as that diagnostic message. And I'll end up by saying that there is this mechanism in the draft right now where we use a registry, an IANA registry, as a kind of a means of indirection, where you're not just putting a URL in the DNS response. You actually have to do a lookup in a copy of the registry locally, and then create a URI template, and then you can go and follow that. And originally, the purpose of that template was to do two things. It was to allow a lookup of those longer details, so you didn't have to fit all of the details into a DNS response. But it was also to provide some transparency about how this mechanism was being used, so that it had to be in the registry. And that is transparency not only in the behavior of the DNS resolvers, it's also transparency about what the browsers are capable of using this mechanism for. So it's kind of putting pressure on both sides there. That's all I have to discuss.
Thank you. Thank you. We have time for questions, comments. Okay, we have remote, 2 people.
I think Wes is pressing a button.
Oh, Gautam is first. Is that in the room? Yeah. Oh, I should have locked the queue now. I'm too late. Okay, to give everybody a fair chance, please keep it compact and short. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. This is great. Gautam Akiwate, Apple. So I have 3 comments. One, DNS filtering. There is a work party in ICANN-SAC that actually Warren is leading. So I think there might be some coordination that you folks might want to do. The second is...
I'm having trouble hearing you, and I think it's just the acoustics of the room.
Oh. The first was that ICANN-SAC has a work party which Warren is leading. So I think there might be some coordination that you folks can do.
Talk to Warren. Got it.
Yes. The second was, I think Safari already does display messages based on extended DNS error codes, and this seems like a great addition. We are always looking to improve, so I think we can totally do this. But I think we need to figure out what the trust model looks like for the URLs. And I think the idea of a registry seems reasonable, but I know there has been pushback for that, but we can discuss offline.
Thanks.
Ben?
Hi. So I'm not sure I agree with the role this draft implies for IANA, but I really appreciate the care this draft shows toward the very dangerous legal and even constitutional issues that are in play when we start talking about DNS interference. I think the norms we signal here at the IETF have a real impact on the way these systems behave. I think you can see that in the way legal systems tend not to interfere with, like, the web PKI, where we've made clear that that's really important, and so people don't mess with it. My main takeaway from this draft is that we don't actually have consensus on the right way to approach signaling DNS interference. We have some real momentum now with this draft to think deeper and look for a solution that can represent real IETF consensus. So I think we should not advance the structured error data for filtered DNS draft at this point. Let's not charge down the wrong path here. let's now that we have a broader range of voices participating, let's make sure that we really consider our options carefully and come up with the right answer.
Thanks.
Wes Hardiker, USC ISI, and the ICANN board, but I don't speak for them. So when we wrote the extended DNS error draft, we did dive into this to a large extent, and the conclusion of the working group at the time is it's way too complex to show messages to the users. It's way too hard to ever do that, let alone it's great if you block the www record, but images from here or a CDN from here. There's been discussions on the mailing list today about blocking JavaScript through Cloudflare that breaks the agenda, for the IETF or whatever. And so you'll find that there's a bunch of weird security holes that even if you're going to try and display the message, you could actually end up displaying a message that is potentially even harmful. So it gets really complex really quick, which is why the working group at the end with EDE said, this is for system administrator level debugging. And I actually was not on that side of the consensus, by the way. So I'm passing along what has happened in the past. That doesn't mean we shouldn't revisit it, but you might want to go read the past discussions, which is something I hate when people tell me too.
Right. So I know that the browser, and again, I'm not speaking for them, but from extended osmosis over way too long, I know that they deal with this on a constant basis. This is not a new problem for them. The web is a very complex thing, and combining all these different resources into a page view, this is not a novel problem for them. It's not that it's easy, but they do have approaches and techniques and preferences that they can apply to that situation to do the right thing. And I think this would probably be for top-level navigations to start with. The premise of this draft, by the way, is that it does not guarantee that something will be shown to the user. It's not that we want 100% coverage, because that's not going to happen. But that if it happens enough, it can start a conversation about why a particular domain is being blocked, for example.
Okay, we're a bit limited in time, but I want to give the mic to Vittorio and also to Rolf, but please be brief.
Okay, Victor Bertola, Open Exchange, try to be brief. Thanks for doing this. I think I can agree with almost everything you said. I think that in the end there will be a policy call on whether the security angle is more important than the presenting a message, but I think it's due time we try to find a way at least to provide a way for browsers to do this when there's consensus that they should. The only thing I want to stress again is that we have to find a way so that everybody who's doing filtering can use this and not just the 3 public resolvers.
Thank you.
And Alfeva Akamai, so also very supportive of this. And again, Safari is leading the way by already doing some of it, and extending this to more useful error messages is a good idea.
A little bit closer to the mic.
The question I have is, so you said that, or did I understand correct, that the messages displayed to the users might actually, or the error types might be less than what it's in the registry? So kind of like, it doesn't matter if you register if the browsers don't do it, right?
Right. It's a good question. I think the status and the contents of the registry is in a bit of flux right now as it settles down. We just did an update to kind of get rid of the separate data format for all those details at the end of the URL. And now it is just a URL that you go to, and it would be a normal web page. So I imagine that we'll probably adjust that. But we wanted to get this in front of the group and start a discussion first.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Mark. And yeah, please continue the discussion on the mailing list and find Mark in the hallway.
Is DNSOP the right mailing list to do this on?
We think it is, but it's also a discussion with the AD and the new AD, probably. But I see some nodding. So yeah, okay. Yeah. Let's continue the discussion here in DNSOP. And if we think, well, let's continue the discussion in DNSOP for sure.
Yeah, I get to subscribe to another mailing list.
Yeah. Hi. So you want the clicker? There you go. One moment.
Hello, this is Kazunori Fujiwara from JPRS. William and I submitted clarifications to the DNS ranking data, draft Fujiwara DNSOP ranking data 00. Section 5.4.1 ranking data of RFC 2181 assumed that information obtained from zone files, zone transfers, and name resolution will be mixed together. In the past, recursive resolvers would return data from referral responses, such as delegation information or glue, in the answer section of responses. However, modern recursive resolvers complete name resolution with an authoritative response from an authoritative server that has authority through delegation. However, there is no clear documentation of this, and the ranking data only indicates the priority among data, not its validity. Attacks using responses that do not correspond to queries and additional data that is not required have been considered and reported. So unnecessary data should be discarded. These are our proposals. Number one, obsolete section 5.4.1 ranking data of RFC 2181 and add new directives on how to handle data, how to handle that data. These are new directives. Number one, authoritative servers must not merge zone data. Zone data should be retrieved from a source. Zone data should be retrieved from a source, zone file, internal database, or zone transfer. Number two, name resolution results, answer section or NX domain, no data must be authoritative responses from authoritative servers that has authority through delegation. And number three, non-authoritative responses, referral delegation responses from authoritative servers must only be used to query the delegated authoritative server during the name resolution. Number four, names and IP addresses of the names of and IP address of the authoritative name servers for zones such as the root zone that are built-in or loaded from hints files must only be used for priming a resolver for those zones. And there may be additional considerations. Further directives could be made, and they may be DNS software implementation guidelines, which would be large in scale. So it is necessary to consider whether to proceed with them. If a DNS server plays different roles for different namespaces, authoritative server, recursive resolver, forwarder, it must not merge DNS data for each role. The additional section returned as result of name resolution must be exactly the same as the additional section that came from authoritative response from the authoritative server or a separate authoritative response resulting from name resolution. Full service resolvers should only accept the following data from authoritative servers: NS and DAS in authority section of delegation response and GRU A quad A in additional section. SOA-RRs in the authority section of authoritative NX domain and no data responses in response to the query. The answer section of authoritative response in response to the query, and any additional sections returned any additional sections allowed by type and delegated domain name, and should not accept any other information. And we got several helpful comments. Unbound treats DSRR set plus RRC in referral responses as the same as an authoritative response. And RFC 5452 updates section 5.4.1 of RFC 2181. So we need to add new text. Full service reservoirs must perform section 9.1 of RFC 5452 query matching rules. And recursive resolvers still do mix authoritative and recursive functions, but bind lines zone in a recursive mode and unbound local zone changes that the server will act as an authoritative server at the specified domain name and the below. And consider RFC 8806 local root. And Directive 3 during the name resolution prevents caching. Authors will remove this and some text on some text on RFC 5.4.1 of RFC 2181 are necessary because there are definitions of address record and GRU. So obsolete is not good. And the word merge is confusing. And consider RFC 8198 aggressive use of DNSSEC validated cache. Consider RPZ DNSBL issues. And consider mixing use of forwarders. Next steps. Authors will update the draft soon after this IETF meeting to reflect comments. And major changes also obsolete to updates section 5.4.1 of RFC 2181. And then please review.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions? Andre. So thank you very much. Willem will be also remote available, so he will tune in.
Okay.
Oh, there's yeah, thanks.
This is
Please go.
Andre, I see. So I know that everybody knows that we made a mess years ago by putting the same data into two levels of trust. But we now have a clear way forward with DELEG record. So maybe instead of just building sandcastle in the mud puddle, we can build a roof and put the energy into doing the DELEG stuff instead of spending time of, just trying to fix the NS records that we can't really do. So just an idea that if this is worth the effort.
Yeah, so I think the legacy way of doing delegations will be around for a while, and I think what we are trying to do with this work is to bring clarity, which functions have which responsibilities and which DNS data is valid to use for those responsibilities. Yeah.
Thank you. Jim?
Thanks, Jim Reed. In response to what Andre just said, I don't think this is an either-or decision here. I think we have to do both. We have to deal with the legacy installed base of code that's probably going to be upgraded in a fairly slow manner and may not adopt DELEG for some time. And DELEG itself is still very premature. We don't have any sort of documents that are anywhere close to working group consensus. So I think we have to do both. And if we can clean up some of the stuff that's got with the existing DNS implementations along the suggestions that Will and Fujiwara have put forward, I think that's a big step forward. Yes, we'd like to move to a new delegation model, and maybe DELEG will achieve that, but that's a long, long way in the future, in my view. What do we do meantime?
Thank you. Rolf?
So, I mean, DNS is currently working, and the problem that I have with this is it mixes a lot of stuff, because it mixes the different functions that we have in DNS, and then it mixes what to do with certain kinds of packages. So if we want to do that, we might have to change the structure to really go from these are the functions, and these are also maybe the functions that make sense in the future, because some might not, and then add that. But again, I think the DNS stuff is currently working with the guidance, and we shouldn't, down the road, I think, change the guidance. We maybe could document it, but I don't think we should change it.
Yes, I agree. I think that what we are trying to do is not to mix everything together, but just to pull it or more focus it around the functions instead of saying every data is the same and this has precedence over the other things. So we're trying to bring more clarity to this and also reflect current practice better.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Fujiwara-san. Thank you, Willem. And I want to thank all the speakers. We're 1 minute late. Apologies, but thank you all, and see you Thursday for our next DNSOP session.